In a distant corner of the galaxy, far from the noise of everyday life, a race of highly intelligent aliens known as the Xerians watched the humans closely. The Xerians had been observing Earth for centuries, studying the strange creatures that inhabited it. Unlike most species, the Xerians had no interest in conquering or interfering with the worlds they came across. They believed in peace, knowledge, and understanding. But they couldn't ignore the rise of humanity. The Xerians were not like other races. They were advanced beyond any other civilization the galaxy had ever known. Their ships could travel faster than the speed of light, and their technology was unmatched. They could see things happening across the galaxy in real time and were aware of every major event unfolding in the universe. What concerned them most, however, was humanity. From the moment they began watching Earth, the Xerians noticed something disturbing. Humans were violent. They fought wars over land, resources, and even beliefs. They didn't hesitate to destroy entire cities or wage battles that claimed millions of lives. But what worried the Xerians even more was that these humans were advancing quickly. They had mastered the art of space travel. And with each new discovery, they seemed to get more reckless. The Xerians had warned the galaxy about other dangerous species in the past. But humanity was different. There was something about them that made them particularly dangerous. They weren't like the other species they had encountered, who had their own issues but never truly posed a threat on a galactic scale. Humans were capable of much more. The Xerians knew that if they didn't act soon, humanity could become the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. After years of careful observation, the Xerians decided to send a warning. They crafted a message, one they hoped would get through to the galaxy's leaders. It wasn't just a simple warning, it was a desperate plea. The message explained that humans were on the verge of breaking through to the stars. Once they reached that point, the Xerians knew, there would be no stopping them. They were a species driven by ambition, and their thirst for power and control would only grow. The Xerians' warning was sent out to every known species, across every star system. It was broadcasted on frequencies only the most advanced civilizations could hear. They told the galaxy that humans were coming, and they were dangerous. They urged the other races to prepare for what was to come. They spoke of the humans' violent history, their need for resources, and their inability to work with others. The message was clear, humanity would be a force unlike any other. But what the Xerians didn't expect was the response, or rather, the lack of it. The galaxy ignored the warning. At first, it was just a few minor species that dismissed the threat. But soon, more and more civilizations followed suit. Some laughed at the idea. Others simply didn't care. They saw humans as just another young species, one that would eventually settle down and learn peace like the rest of the galaxy. To them, the Xerians' concerns seemed overblown, even paranoid. They thought, why should we be worried about humans? After all, they were still so new to space travel and still had a long way to go. The Xerians were frustrated. They had spent so much time and effort trying to warn the galaxy, and now no one seemed to take them seriously. They tried again, sending out more messages, but the response was always the same, humans are nothing to worry about. The Xerians knew it wasn't true. They could feel it. The humans' desire for control would soon turn into an unstoppable force. So, they watched in silence as the galaxy continued to ignore them. The Xerians had done everything they could. Now, it was up to the galaxy to decide if they would listen, or face the consequences of their ignorance. The Xerians' warning echoed through space, but the galaxy paid no attention. And as the humans continued to grow stronger, the Xerians knew they had made a terrible mistake. The question was no longer whether the humans would become a threat. It was whether the galaxy would ever be able to stop them. Years passed after the Xerians' warning, and humanity's advancement continued at an alarming rate. The humans had already begun to make strides in space travel, but now, they were crossing boundaries that no one had expected them to reach so quickly. The very thing the Xerians had feared was now unfolding right before their eyes. Humanity had broken through the final barrier, interstellar space travel. At first, the other species watched the humans' progress with mild curiosity. After all, the human race had only just begun exploring their own solar system. But soon, they began venturing farther into the stars, discovering new planets, and even making contact with other species. Many of the peaceful races thought of this as a good thing, a sign that humanity had finally matured and would settle into the galaxy's peaceful community. They hoped that the aggressive behavior they had shown on Earth would eventually fade away. However, the Xerians knew better. They saw something that the rest of the galaxy missed. They watched as humans began to colonize new planets, taking more resources than they needed, and claiming territories as if they were their own. There was no interest in peaceful exchange or trade with other species. No, the humans were doing what they always did, taking. The first real signs of trouble came when humans encountered a peaceful, thriving planet in a neighboring system. The planet's inhabitants were a race of gentle, nature-loving beings called the Natheri. They had lived in harmony with their world for centuries, and they were extremely reluctant to engage in anything that might disturb their peaceful existence. When the humans arrived, they saw the Natheri as nothing more than a stepping stone to further their expansion. Instead of negotiating, instead of offering an alliance, the humans made demands. They wanted resources, land, and control over the planet's vast natural reserves. At first, the Natheri were confused. Why would anyone demand something so aggressive without even understanding their culture? They tried to communicate peacefully, offering their knowledge and expertise in exchange for time to consider the humans' proposal. But the humans didn't want time. They wanted power. Without warning, humanity launched an attack on the Natheri, using their newly advanced weapons. The Natheri, unprepared for such an assault, were devastated. Cities were destroyed, the planet's environment was damaged, and millions of Natheri lost their lives. The humans took what they came for, leaving the planet in ruins, their demands satisfied. This was the first real sign of humanity's true nature as the Xerians had predicted. The peaceful races of the galaxy were stunned. They couldn't believe that humans had attacked without provocation. Some tried to understand, but others felt betrayed and frightened. How could a species so new to space travel, so full of potential, behave like this? The Xerians, however, were not surprised. They had seen it coming from the start. They understood that humans, driven by their greed and ambition, could never coexist peacefully with others. Their need for control would always outweigh their ability to share, and the galaxy would soon feel the full weight of this truth. Despite the warnings, humanity's actions did not go unnoticed. In fact, it sparked something that the Xerians had not anticipated: resistance. Smaller, more peaceful species began to form alliances, deciding that if humanity was going to conquer, they would have to be stopped. But they were no match for the sheer power of humanity's rapidly advancing military. Back on Earth, the leaders were celebrating their newfound dominance. They saw their attack on the Natheri as a victory, and many humans felt a sense of pride in their ability to conquer. The entire galaxy was now at their feet, and they believed it was only a matter of time before they would control every planet in their reach. The Natheri, broken and battered, reached out to other civilizations, desperate for help, but the response from the galaxy was slow. Most species believed that the humans would burn themselves out, just as they had done in the past. They failed to see that humanity wasn't stopping. They weren't going to slow down. As the humans continued to build their empire, the Xerians sent another message, one they had hoped they would never need to send: it has begun. The galaxy is in danger. Prepare yourselves. But even the Xerians knew it was too late. The warning they had given years ago had fallen on deaf ears, and now the galaxy was facing an unstoppable force. The humans' rise was inevitable, and as they claimed more worlds, more species, and more power, the galaxy began to realize something terrifying. They had made a grave mistake by ignoring the Xerians' warning. Humanity was no longer just a threat, they were a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, and hungry for more. The Xerians watched with a heavy heart as the galaxy fell into chaos. Their once hopeful warning now felt like a distant memory. The question no longer was if humanity would conquer, it was when the entire galaxy would fall under their rule. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. The once peaceful star systems, full of species that coexisted without conflict, were now beginning to show cracks. The humans were growing bolder with each passing day, expanding their reach across the stars without mercy. The warning the Xerians had sent out had been ignored, laughed off as a paranoid overreaction. Now, the consequences of that ignorance were becoming painfully clear. The first major attack came from a human fleet that arrived in a system called Rylos, a peaceful planet where the inhabitants were known for their wisdom and deep understanding of the universe. The Rylorians, a race of scholars and philosophers, had never engaged in war. They lived their lives in harmony, choosing instead to study the stars and share knowledge with anyone who sought it. The Rylorians believed that the universe was meant to be explored with peace, not with violence. They were known as the Keepers of Knowledge, and their libraries contained data from civilizations all across the galaxy. But the humans saw the Rylorians' wealth of knowledge as an opportunity. They didn't see the Rylorians as peaceful beings to learn from or ally with. No, the humans saw only one thing: resources. The Rylorians had rare minerals in their soil that were essential for the humans' advanced weapons and technology. The Rylorians had spent centuries cultivating their planet in harmony with nature, but to the humans, their peaceful existence was nothing more than a vulnerability. When the humans arrived, the Rylorians were at first puzzled. Their planet's peaceful reputation had spread far and wide, so the humans' arrival was unexpected. At first, they greeted the humans with the hope of opening a dialogue, offering knowledge in exchange for peace. The humans, however, were not interested in conversation. They didn't want knowledge, they wanted control. The humans made demands. They wanted the minerals beneath the Rylorian soil. They demanded the Rylorians share their technological secrets, their wisdom, and the very resources they had spent centuries cultivating. The Rylorians tried to negotiate, offering alternative solutions. They suggested peaceful trade, where both sides could benefit, but the humans would have none of it. The more the Rylorians refused, the more aggressive the humans became. Without warning, the humans launched their first attack. They didn't care about diplomacy, nor did they care about the consequences. The human fleet unleashed their weapons on the defenseless Rylorians, leveling their cities and leaving destruction in their wake. The Rylorians tried to fight back, but their peaceful culture had never prepared them for war. They didn't have the weapons to defend themselves against the brutal human assault. The Rylorian cities fell one by one. The sky was darkened with the smoke of burning buildings, and the land was scarred with craters from the human bombs. The once beautiful planet was turned into a wasteland in a matter of days. The humans took what they wanted, stripping the planet of its precious resources, and left without a second thought. The galaxy watched in horror as the Rylorians sent out desperate pleas for help. But it was too late. The humans had made their mark, and the galaxy now knew what the Xerians had warned them about. Humans were not just curious explorers, they were conquerors. They were driven by an insatiable hunger for more land, more resources, more power. The other species that had once laughed off the Xerians' warnings were now beginning to feel the weight of their mistake. The peaceful worlds, who had believed the Xerians were too cautious, were starting to realize the truth. Humanity was not just a young, developing species, it was a dangerous force with the potential to destroy everything in its path. But the humans did not stop there. They moved on to the next system, then the next. Each new planet they encountered was met with the same brutal strategy. The humans didn't care about culture or history. They didn't care about diplomacy. They only cared about what they could take. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. As the humans expanded their empire, their tactics grew more ruthless. Entire civilizations that had once stood proudly in the galaxy were now falling under human control. The Xerians watched helplessly as the galaxy crumbled around them. Their fear was now a reality. The once bright future of peaceful coexistence had been shattered, replaced by a nightmare of destruction. But there was still hope. The Xerians knew that if the galaxy could unite, if the peaceful races could finally put aside their differences and join forces, they might still have a chance to stop the human threat. The resistance was forming, though it was still in its early stages. But for now, the galaxy was helpless against the overwhelming might of humanity. The Xerians' warning had come too late. The humans were already on the move, and the galaxy was being consumed by their unrelenting hunger for control. In the wake of humanity's brutal assault on the Relorians, the galaxy was plunged into a state of uncertainty and fear. Planets once united in peace now stood on the brink of war. The realization that the humans were a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen was sinking in. The peaceful races, who had lived in harmony for centuries, were now faced with an undeniable truth: they would either fight back, or they would be swept aside. The Xerians, though devastated by the galaxy's ignorance, refused to give up. They had known this day would come, but watching the destruction unfold was still heartbreaking. They were the first to act, reaching out to every surviving species, trying to rally them into a unified front. It wasn't easy. Many races had long histories of distrust with each other. The Natheri, still recovering from their losses, were hesitant. The Verdun, a race of highly intelligent beings known for their technological prowess, were divided on whether it was worth risking everything for a war they didn't fully understand. But the Xerians understood one thing: humanity's power was too great for any single race to face alone. They knew that only by joining forces could the galaxy stand a chance against the relentless human machine. The Xerians didn't waste time. They traveled from planet to planet, pleading with each species to form an alliance, one that would be powerful enough to challenge humanity. Slowly, other races began to listen. The Vortas, a fierce warrior race who had always preferred isolation, agreed to help, though they were skeptical of working with others. The Solari, a race of peaceful energy beings, offered their knowledge of advanced energy manipulation, hoping to tip the scales in favor of the resistance. Even the ancient Shulkor, a race of nomadic travelers who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, were convinced that humanity's rise would be the end of the galaxy's golden age. The leaders of the resistance met in secret, away from the prying eyes of human spies. It was a fragile alliance, built on shared desperation rather than trust. Each race brought something unique to the table: technology, weapons, knowledge, but none of them knew how to defeat humanity. The humans were too strong, their military too advanced. The resistance knew they needed a strategy that would exploit humanity's one weakness: their overconfidence. At the core of the resistance was the Xerians' understanding of human behavior. They knew that humanity's greed and desire for domination would eventually lead to mistakes. But that didn't mean the fight would be easy. The resistance had no time to waste, and they knew they had to strike quickly. The first major plan was simple but risky. The resistance would target human supply lines, taking out the transports that brought resources to the expanding human empire. It wasn't much, but it would force the humans to spread their forces thin, giving the resistance a fighting chance. The Xerians were the ones to lead this charge, using their advanced ships and stealth technology to strike swiftly and then disappear into the void of space. The other races followed suit, slowly picking off human convoys as they moved through uncharted sectors. At first, humanity didn't respond as expected. The resistance's small victories were seen as mere annoyances. But they began to notice something: humans weren't invincible. Their fleets could be disrupted. Their soldiers could be outsmarted. And for the first time in a long while, the humans felt the sting of defeat. The resistance didn't just fight in space, they began to infiltrate human-controlled planets, planting sleeper cells on world after world. These cells spread information, created unrest, and sparked revolts among human colonies. The galaxy was waking up to the reality that humanity could be stopped, but it wouldn't be easy. Trust between the different species in the resistance was fragile, and every small victory was countered by a bigger loss. Still, the momentum shifted. The humans had underestimated the galaxy's resolve. The resistance began to grow stronger, and humanity began to feel the pressure. On Earth, the leaders who had once ruled with unchecked power began to argue among themselves. Some saw the writing on the wall: humanity had bitten off more than it could chew. Others, more stubborn, believed that victory was still within reach, no matter the cost. The battle lines were drawn. The galaxy had united under one cause: to stop humanity before it consumed everything. Yet, the resistance knew one thing for certain: it wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. The question now was not if the humans could be defeated, it was how. In the heart of the resistance, the leaders discussed their final strategy. It wasn't just about defeating the human forces in battle, it was about proving that the galaxy could stand together, stronger than the sum of its parts. The Xerians knew that this was humanity's ultimate test. If they failed now, the galaxy would be lost forever. But for now, the resistance was gaining momentum. Hope had returned to the galaxy. The fight was just beginning. The day had arrived. The galaxy was ready for its final battle. The once vast empire of peaceful worlds now stood united, a force of resistance born from the ashes of destroyed civilizations. The humans had underestimated their enemies at every turn, but they were about to face a confrontation like no other. The galaxy, in all its diversity and power, was coming together to challenge the human empire that had so ruthlessly spread across the stars. The final plan was set in motion by the leaders of the resistance, with the Xerians leading the charge. They had spent months carefully crafting a strategy that would attack the heart of humanity's strength. Their plan was bold, dangerous, and perhaps the only way to stop the human war machine in its tracks. The resistance would strike at the core of the human empire, the capital planet, Earth. Earth, once a home to billions of people, had transformed into a fortress, heavily fortified and surrounded by fleets of warships. The planet's defense systems were powerful, and its military leadership was ruthless. But the resistance had one thing the humans didn't: unity. And they had learned from their previous mistakes. They would not charge in blindly. This time, they had something the humans could never anticipate: a strategy built on deception, subterfuge, and cunning. The first phase of the plan was simple: disrupt the communications between Earth and the rest of the human colonies. The Xerians used their stealth technology to launch a series of well-coordinated attacks on human relay stations scattered across the galaxy. Within hours, human commanders found themselves isolated, unable to communicate with their forces or coordinate effectively. The resistance used this moment to launch a massive offensive against human fleets scattered across several star systems. Simultaneously, the resistance cells on human-controlled worlds began to rise. The Verdun, once hesitant to join the battle, now provided critical intelligence, revealing human vulnerabilities in their defense systems. The Solari's energy manipulation skills were put to use, causing massive disruptions in human energy grids. The Vortas, skilled in combat, led guerrilla strikes on human military outposts across dozens of planets. The galaxy's forces were everywhere, and they were relentless. As the human fleet scrambled to respond to these strikes, a final, unexpected element was introduced into the fray: the human rebellion. The seeds of dissent that had been planted long ago finally sprouted. Some humans, tired of the constant war and hunger for power, began to rebel against their own leaders. They knew they couldn't stop the tide of resistance on their own, but they could help. And help they did, offering vital inside information, sabotaging key human defenses, and sowing confusion within the ranks. While the resistance kept the human forces busy in multiple systems, the Xerians led the final assault on Earth. Their ships, equipped with the latest in stealth technology and advanced weapons, penetrated the atmosphere, landing on the outskirts of Earth's heavily fortified capital cities. The human defense forces, caught off guard by the sudden breach, scrambled to mount a defense. But it was already too late. The resistance made their move. Coordinated attacks from the ground, air, and space began to overwhelm the human forces. It was not a conventional war, it was a battle of attrition, a test of endurance and willpower. The resistance fought with everything they had, fueled by the memory of the destruction humanity had caused. They had lost so much, and now, they were determined to reclaim what was theirs. The final confrontation took place in the heart of Earth's capital. The human leadership, surrounded by their military elite, had nowhere to run. The Xerians, with their unmatched intelligence, led the final charge, breaking through Earth's last line of defense and making their way to the heart of the human government. The galaxy's forces, now united, had brought humanity to its knees. In the final moments, humanity's leaders, those who had once believed they were untouchable, faced the reality of their situation. They had tried to control the galaxy, to conquer everything in their path, but they had underestimated their enemies. They had underestimated the galaxy itself. The resistance had not only fought back, they had shown the strength of unity, the power of species working together for the greater good. The human empire, once so vast and seemingly unstoppable, crumbled. The final blow was struck when the galaxy's leaders decided that humanity would no longer be allowed to continue its destructive path. Earth, once a symbol of hope and ambition for humanity, was now a symbol of hubris and failure. The battle was over, but the war had changed everything. The galaxy had been forever altered by the actions of humanity. The peaceful races, though victorious, knew that they could never go back to the way things were. The cost of war was too great, and many worlds lay in ruin. But at least the galaxy had survived. At least humanity's reign of terror had ended. As the dust settled and the final remnants of humanity's empire fell, the Xerians stood among the ruins, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they had been right. The galaxy had survived, but it had been a near thing. And now, they could only hope that humanity's lessons would be remembered, so that the galaxy could rebuild and ensure that peace would never again be taken for granted.